So when you're creating a link token in Plaid, you'll notice we have this products array that you need to fill out. Now you might assume that you need to include any and all products that you're planning on using in your app. That's a good assumption, but it's wrong. You might then notice that we have this other products array, and then this one, and then this one. So what's the difference between all of these and which ones should you actually use? Well, let's find out in today's quick tip. So yes, you would be forgiven for not fully understanding the difference between all these arrays. I mean, I have to keep looking it up and I work here. So let's see if I can explain to you what all these are and why you'd want to use them. Let's start with the most common one, the products array. When you add a product to the products array, you're doing three things. First, you're telling Plaid that any products you list here are required. This means that when a user is scrolling through their list of financial institutions to try and find theirs, we'll only show ones that support all the products listed here. If you list investments in the products array, for instance, we probably won't show your local credit union. Now, a user can still select that bank by typing it in directly, but if they do, we'll display an error message telling them that this financial institution doesn't support this use case. I know this can be a confusing error sometimes, but it turns out this is less confusing to most users than not having their bank show up at all. Second, depending on the product, Plaid might display some additional UI or special wording to keep your lawyers happy, or less nervous than usual, which I guess is the best you can expect from your lawyers. And third, once you've gotten your access token, Plaid will start doing all the work necessary to pre-fetch this data. If you've listed auth, for instance, Plaid will go ahead and grab the user's routing and account numbers. If you've listed transactions, Plaid will start downloading historical transactions. That way, these product endpoints are more likely to be ready by the time you call them. This also means that because Plaid is fetching this data for you, you'll be getting billed for these products. Now, you do need to list at least one product here, so if you're only using one product in your app, I guess you're done with this video. Congratulations. But otherwise, the general recommendation here is that if your application requires these products to work, you should include them in the products array. But here's where things can get a little tricky. First, not all financial institutions are alike. Different banks might have similar looking checking and savings accounts, and maybe they all support auth, but one of them will support transactions and the other won't. Or one might support identity and the other doesn't. Second, the real world is kind of messy. Sometimes we know a bank typically supports a product, but for any number of different edge cases, we're not able to retrieve product data for all products when the user connects to it. And third, banks that use the OAuth flow supply their own consent screens. When a user connects to one of these banks, they might not check the appropriate Share My Data checkbox. So even though the information is available, the bank won't share it. So for cases like this, we have the required if supported products array. This array means that if the bank supports these products, we will require them. For example, if you're trying to set up ACH transfers, you'll need auth information to get routing and account numbers, but you also want to get identity information to help guard against fraud. Now, it turns out some banks that support auth just don't support identity. But it also turns out some bad actors deliberately uncheck that it's okay to share my identity box in the OAuth flow in an attempt to get away with fraud. You want to make sure you support as many banks as possible, but not let fraudsters get away with leaving that box unchecked. So in this case, you would add auth to the products array, and then identity to the required if supported products array. Users can still connect to this set of banks just fine, but if a user connects to one of these OAuth banks and doesn't check that consent box, Plaid will give them an error and ask them to try again. Now the next level down from that is the optional products array. These are for products that are truly optional. There's a pretty good chance you'll want to use them, but your app will still work fine if you can't. Again, typical reasons why a product won't work is that the institution simply doesn't support it, and this will happen quite often if you list a product in the optional products array because we won't filter the list of financial institutions by whether or not they support these products. Like this red bank here, it'll still show up in link. Or it could be because of these OAuth permissions, or it could be that the connection to the bank is a little flaky. For whatever reason, we can't fetch the data you would need to support a Plaid product. And, there are definitely situations where you'll want to use the product if we have that data, but it's not the end of the world if you can't. So that's what the optional products array is for. This is saying, yes, I want to use this product, but if you have trouble fetching it for any reason, that's fine. Now, by listing products in this array, you are still signaling to Plaid that you're probably going to use them in the future. So Plaid will go out and start fetching data for these products if it's available. This also means that, with the exception of auth and identity, you'll get billed for these products when you create the item, whether or not you ever call the endpoint. But hang on, you're saying, what if I don't want to get charged for these optional products? Is there a way to make these optional products more, optional? And there is. It turns out you don't need to include your product in any of these product arrays at all. Even if you don't list your product anywhere here, you can still try to make an API call using an access token for an existing item. Now, when that happens, Plaid will do its best to try and get this data for you, and you'll only get billed when you make this call. Now, there are a few drawbacks to doing things this way. First, there's no guarantee this call is going to work. Like with our optional products, there's a chance that your user will select an institution that doesn't support this endpoint, and so you'll need to be prepared for errors here. Second, because we haven't fetched any of this data ahead of time, latency is going to be much worse. Third, this won't work for any products where we need to show the user some specific UI. For instance, identity verification and some of the auth flows won't work because they require additional input from the user. There's some similar issues with assets and bank income, I think. In addition to all that, there's a burden on you, the developer, to make sure that your user understands that you're fetching this additional product data and that they are okay with it. In fact, not doing so means you'll probably be out of compliance with the upcoming 1033 rules that the CFPB is proposing. And so we have the Data Transparency Messaging Program. This is a program currently in beta at the time of this video that does the work of making sure you have consent from your user before retrieving any optional product data. And we do this with the Additional Consented Products Array. Now, this works similar to the not listing the product at all approach. The product is completely optional, and Plaid won't prefetch any data for any products listed here. The difference is that Plaid displays some messaging in LINQ that lets the user know you might fetch this data in the future. And, we record that fact for auditing purposes. If you are enrolled in this program and try to retrieve data for a product that you don't include in this array, you'll get an error and you'll need to run LINQ in update mode with a new additional consented products array so the user can properly add their consent. I should also probably point out, you can't list every single Plaid product here. You actually need to have this product enabled in production and demonstrate to us that you're planning on using it in the future. Now, like I said, at the time of this video, this program is in beta and you can activate it here in the LINQ customization screen, but that might change in the future. Plaid is building this feature in anticipation of the upcoming 1033 rules, and if it turns out you're required to have something like this in your app, we'll turn it on for everybody sometime before the compliance date. Now, at the time of this video, nothing's been finalized, so make sure you check with the docs to see the latest status here. So let's summarize here the 5 different ways of listing products. The products array is basically saying these products are required. If the financial institution doesn't support all these, I'm going to take my ball and go home. Required if supported is basically saying if the bank supports these products, the user better give me permission to use them, but I'll still allow institutions where the products aren't supported at all. Optional is sort of I'm planning on using these products, so go ahead and prefetch the data, but it's not the end of the world if I don't have access to them. Not including product in any of these arrays is saying, yeah, this product is really optional. Don't do anything now, but try the best you can if I request the product later. And finally, additional consented products is saying, I want Plaid to do the work of collecting consent for these products because I might want them in the future. But just like in the previous step, I don't want you to prefetch any data or bill me or anything. Now, there's still additional nuances around what products to list where, particularly for specific combinations of products. But for that, I'm going to refer you to the documentation or maybe a future video. This is supposed to be a quick tip, not a medium longish tip. Anyway, thanks for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this one, and happy plaiding.